Hi, this is Reading Explained. My name is Olivia, and as always, I am here to explain to you what it is that the readings that you're hearing on Sunday are actually saying. I know it can be difficult to pay attention to sometimes and definitely difficult to understand, so maybe some explanations will help. Keep in mind, every parish follows one of three reading cycles, year A, year B, or year C. That's so you're not hearing the same readings on the same Sunday year after year. I am currently going off of the year A cycle. If your parish is on that same cycle currently, you will hear this exact reading in Mass on Sunday, and you can take pride in being one of the few people in the room who actually know what it's saying. If your parish is following one of the other two cycles, then no big deal. I encourage you to take the free lesson anyway. And keep in mind that you will eventually hear this reading because they repeat themselves every 3 years. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to do the reading for you first, and then I'm going to give you some kinds of extra context as to what's going on, throw some explanations in there for you, hopefully to make it a little bit easier. This week, we're doing the first reading as we come up on the 13th Sunday in Ordinary Time. So the first reading is from the second book of Kings, and here's what it says. One day, Elijah came to Shunem, where there was a woman of influence who urged him to dine with her. Afterward, whenever he passed by, he used to stop there to dine. So she said to her husband, "I know that Elijah is a holy man of God. Since he visits us often, let's arrange a little room on the roof and furnish it for him with a bed, table, chair, and lamp, so that when he comes to us, he can stay there." Sometime later, Elijah arrived and stayed in the room overnight. Later, Elijah asked, "Can something be done for her?" His servant Gehazi answered, "Yes, she has no son, and her husband is getting on in years." Elijah said, "Call her." When the woman had been called and stood at the door, Elijah promised, "This time next year you will be fondling a baby son." The word of the Lord. Okay, so a couple things. Number one, this is the first part of a 3-part story. The reading's only focused on the first part. I'm only going to focus on the first part. Ironically enough, though, the reading leaves out the last couple sentences, which are really important for the ending of this first part of the story. So just as a quick little review, you have this prophet Elijah. He's capable of doing these miracles, and he's traveling all around the 12 tribes of Israel and all around that land, and he's passing through this town regularly. So this woman, whose name, unfortunately, we never know, invites him into her home and hosts him for dinner when he's passing through town. Eventually, she comes up with the idea of he should have a room in her house, so he is the place to stay when he's passing through. That level of no strings attached hospitality is really impressive. It's impressive now, and it was impressive back then, too. She was expecting nothing in return, and he's almost a stranger. But she knew that he was a holy man and a man of God, and she had faith. So she said, "Let me help him out." Elijah, the prophet, is equally as blown away by this. So he says to his servant, "What does she need? What can we give her to show our appreciation?" And the servant says, "Well, she has no son." Now, it's a problem to have no son back then because A, there's no one to take care of her and her husband in old age, but B, it was considered the woman's responsibility back then to determine the gender of any baby that they were going to have. And if there was no baby boy for a legacy to be passed down to, the woman carried a little bit of shame for that. So Elijah prophesizes and brings her to the room and says, "This time next year, you will have a healthy baby boy." And the reading ends there. It should not end there because there's more to the story. There's a couple more sentences. And what happens is her reaction is not as expected. She doesn't say, "Oh, wow, that's fantastic news. Thank you so much. I look forward to meeting my baby boy. Have a good night." Instead, she says, "Don't say that to me and give me false hope. Don't mislead me." Turns out she's been suffering from infertility her whole life, and there's nothing that she's wanted more than to be a mother. So instead of just hearing from the prophet that she's going to have a baby and accepting it, it seems like an impossibility in her mind. Spoiler alert, she ends up having the baby a year later, just like he said. And that's the end of the first part of the story. Again, I'm only going to talk about the first part of the story like this reading does. But what can you take from that? Well, there's a million things that we can take from that. But one really important key here is she could have been angry and depressed and taking it out on the world, the fact that she couldn't have a child to no fault of her own. But instead of doing that, here she is extending herself to take care of this stranger who happens to be a prophet. So she's not looking at the world. She's not angry at the world. She is still going out of her way to be kind and care for people. That level of hospitality without expecting anything in return is something that I think we could all learn a little bit from. Plus, it's as if the Lord is testing her faith a little bit here, because the prophet is telling her this time next year, you're going to have a baby boy. And she's saying, please don't get my hopes up if that's not going to happen. But it happens. So she grows in faith a little bit. I encourage you to go check out the second book of Kings and read parts of chapter 4 and then parts of chapter 8, where they go into the next two parts of the story of this woman's family and her faith. But in the meantime, I hope that better helps you understand what it is that you're going to hear this Sunday. If this has been helpful for you, please share this video to someone else that might find it helpful. Please subscribe to my page, like the video, comment on it, whatever you want. Please help me to influence this algorithm to try and get our precious Christian faith out there to anybody who might be interested in learning. So I appreciate it. Please come back next week as I dissect one of the readings for the 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time. Thanks.